So what I want to do really is spend some time just exploring what establishing customers' needs are. Now, you're going to find that whenever you're speaking to prospects, they are either going to be aware of a problem that you can solve, or they may not yet be aware of a problem. And ultimately, what we want to do is making sure we are fully understanding what those individuals' needs are, because when we can map that out and truly identify it, like I said before, we can bring a solution either as a service provider or a platform or a product or product to them to make that problem go away, which is what we want. We want to be selling outcomes. So there's lots that you can do before you go out prospecting. And it's probably worth discussing that for a short moment as well, in the fact that if you haven't already tried to identify an ideal customer persona, and you've probably heard a lot of people talking about this, it's actually a really valuable exercise to do. So Charlotte's done this loads. So I'm going to hand over to her on this one, just to tell us some of the things you could be looking out for to really sort of define that profile of the person you want to be selling to in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think before sort of diving into customer needs, is about just taking it up a level, right? Is actually understanding who are your buyers and who are your decision makers. And that's understanding the needs, what's their problems, what it is that you're able to help solve. And when marketing sort of plays a bit more, there's more of an aggregated view on that, which basically allows you as a business and as a sales to be able to understand, articulate and communicate why you have the solution. So personas are really interesting. You can get very complex with it. You can end up with 20. Personally, start small. Go for 1, 2, 3. Like, just keep it as tight and as narrow as possible. You can build up as you go along. But yeah, try not to get too overwhelmed with that. I see lots of companies make that mistake of 20 different personas, and you end up just spreading too thinly. So that comes from knowing your customer, which is this entire session, but this is about making sure that you actually do something with it, and it doesn't just live with one conversation, that you're actually able to extract it out and be able to use it, be that on your website, marketing collateral, how you're talking about it within a business, and always being able to come back to the why, essentially. So there's some great scorecards. I don't know if you've used this before, Ben, but persona scorecards, which basically is kind of top trumps, best way of describing it, which builds out what your ideal customer profile might be, potentially age range, maybe gender, maybe where they live, maybe it might be more in terms of what they read, media, etc. And that helps you build out who is your customer, and you're only going to find that out by having those conversations. So for me, it's just sort of being able to recognize that there is something else that you can do with all of this information and everything that you learn from today as well. But yeah, top trumps, basically.
We'll share a few of them in the meetup group later, so you can have a look at what to do. But I guess it comes down to, as well, really understanding what their problems are. And so those of you that have heard me speak before or come to any of my sessions will understand that there is a thing called a 2 o'clock in the morning problem, which we actually have uncovered before. It's almost like that piece that you wake up in the middle of the night in cold sweats thinking, how the hell do I make that go away? I don't know how to resolve it. I don't know what it is I need to do. And when you know that about your customer, you work out what the solutions are. But if you're starting out fresh, it's assumptive. But if you've been doing this a while, like Charlotte said, you understand what those customers' needs are. So there's a couple of frameworks that you can use when speaking with prospects to qualify. And you may have heard of these before. One is called BANT. Good old acronyms here. And one is called MEDDIC. So BANT is something that was created by IBM. It's understanding, do they have the budget, the ability to buy? Do they have a need for your product or service? And what is the timeline to purchase? So relatively easy to capture. MEDDIC is spelled as a medic, but with an extra D. So what are the metrics? Who is responsible for the P&L? That's the economic buyer. What is the decision criteria? What is the decision process? Have we identified a pain? And who's the internal champion? There is sometimes a second C on the end, which is what is the competition. Now, these are frameworks, and again, we'll share these in the group meetup group afterwards. But these can be quite complex frameworks to follow, and actually you don't necessarily always need that information. But one thing that always finds itself in any framework is the understanding of a customer's needs. And so we can lead with assumption. We can always lead with assumption, but what we want to do is truly get under the skin and find out what's going on. Now, you might have seen a few LinkedIn posts from me recently about open questions. And typically, this is something that a lot of people read or hear about and they think, oh, it's so simple. I don't need to learn this. But believe me, I've been doing this for 25 years and I still forget. Because I'm caught up in the flow of having a conversation, and it's about being really disciplined and making sure we are using open questions and also instructions when speaking with people. So what do I mean by open questions? And for those that are new to this, an open question is something that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no. And what is an instruction? Well, an instruction is, as it says on the tin, it's a tell me, show me, explain to me, describe to me. These are instructions. So we want to be using open questions and instructions to get information from our prospects when we're engaged with them, when we're in a meeting, when we're at a networking event, when you might be on a first date. It doesn't matter. You can use open questions in any situation to extrapolate information and help that other person feel heard. But it isn't as easy as just asking good open questions. There is also a process that you can apply to this as well. So, for example, if someone came up to me that I'd never met before and asked my inside leg measurement, I'm less likely to give them that information because I've got no clue about who they are, what they want, and there's no rapport being built. So funnels, you've probably all heard of funnels. You can actually use question funnels as well. So these question funnels are literally a case of, imagine a funnel, all right? We're going to start really broad. And what we do when we're starting broad is we're talking about their industry. So something that is entirely removed from them as a human being. So we can ask questions, what are some of the key changes you've seen in the industry over the last 10 years? Did you read that article about so and so and so? Basically just ask questions that are really nice, conversational, broad and unoffensive and non-intrusive. And that will help people get to a point where they're feeling comfortable. And as you're going down that line of questioning, bring it slowly towards their business. And you can explore information about, what changes have you seen in your business? Who have you got new in the team? We're narrowing down to the team in the department. What challenges have you faced in that team over the last 12 months, 24 months with COVID? Again, you're now bringing it down to that individual's role. How long have you been in your role? What were you doing before? Where do you want to see yourself in the next 5 years? These might not be appropriate as sales questions as such, but what you're doing is building rapport and creating conversation. So what we're doing here is we're starting with broad, open questions, and we're slowly narrowing down, because over a period of time, your prospect will become more comfortable with you. So for those of you that haven't joined one of these groups before or spoken to me before, you would have realized that I've not just jumped straight in with tons of information to bombard you with. We're easing you into the process. We're giving you an understanding of the situation, and we're slowly narrowing down to give you more practical advice. And what we want to be doing now is thinking about the types of questions that you can use to narrow down and get more information out of the prospect. So some of the more powerful ones that you're going to think of are, you want to find their situation. So what is the process? How does it work? Explain to me when. These are all questions that you can get somebody to tell you information, and you'll be surprised how quickly people open up. So you might just ask with, tell me more about your role. Okay. Now, it's such a simple instruction, but us as human beings are quite simple creatures. So when we get a basic instruction, we tend to adhere to it and just start talking. And actually, a lot of people like sharing information about themselves and their own roles. So ask questions about the roles. Ask questions, what is the department like? How many people are in your team? What are their roles? What are some of the challenges you've faced over a period of time? And explore those questions. And what I really want to emphasize here is that it should not be an interrogation. Charlotte, you've been on the buying side of being sold to, right?
Yes, just
You had people interrogating you.
yeah, and I was just going to ask actually, just like how do you? No, I was going to think this is open ended, but just like how do you deal with objections? Like how? Because I can imagine there might be people in the audience that might be feeling like, oh, what if they don't answer the question or they refuse to answer the question? Do you find that like, or does it, generally speaking, I guess the more that you do it, the easier it becomes?
If you've got, well, I guess it depends on the circumstance. If you've done a cold call, you might have people resisting, I haven't got time. And in which case, you set that up early. And actually, you do want to be respectful of people's time. If you've got a predetermined meeting or you're at a networking event, they will talk.
Yeah.
And I think it comes back to that funnel piece, right? Where I don't want to go straight in and ask your inside leg measurement. I'm not going to do that. You meet a stranger. What was the biggest failure you've had in the last 2 years? They're just not going to tell you. So, you've got to warm them up and you've got to build rapport, but ultimately you've got to care and you've got to be interested. So just ask nice questions around that, but don't interrogate.
And I think definitely from being on the other side of things, it's warming up. It's understanding boundaries of going straight in. Even if you're going straight into the organisation, those questions are sort of right. Start bigger. And I think this all comes down to research as well. Something I don't think you can over research for going to a networking event. Know who you want to speak to. Know what's happening in the the themes of the industry or the topic that's being discussed at the event. It goes without saying, but come with a question. Like come with a question that you want to find out from this audience, right? So or whoever you're networking with. As someone who's been on the other side of things, I really appreciate the warm up, the actually getting to know me, and the before going in for the right. Now let's talk about, do you have the budget for X, Y, and Z? Whoa, hang on a minute. We've just met. I think the dating analogy is actually essentially it, right? It's, I will give you, it's two-way, and I will give you small parts, but it's not going to be everything.
Absolutely.
Build up the rapport.
Always. The interrogation's a funny one because actually what some of you might be doing is listing down some questions that you want to ask and, some of the key information you're going to need to obtain. And when you've got a list of questions on the screen in front of you or in your mind, what happens is this. You ask the question, you get the answer, and then you move on to the next question. Now, if you're selling, what you've actually done there is missed a huge opportunity to challenge their thinking and find out more information. So you might liken this to mining for oil. So what oil miners do, and little education for you here. I'm not an oil miner, so I don't know the details. They'll find oil and they'll keep going. And they'll keep going and they'll mine that seam until you can't get any more oil, and then they move on. Now, I want you to try and apply that to your questioning technique. I want to ask you a good open question at the beginning. I want to narrow down, but my next question should not be unrelated. It should be related to their answer. And that takes practice, right? So it's not just a case of I've got a list of questions, bang, 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 bang. It's, okay, I want to find out about what their department looks like or what resources they've got. So if you say, how many people are in your team? Well, we've got 10 people in the team made up of these people. And then you don't go and say, what budgets have you got? What are the projects you're working on? You say, all right, so what are their roles? What projects are they typically working on? What's staff turnover been like over the last year? How many of them are new starters? How many are experienced hands? And what you're doing is you're just understanding more information about the dynamic of their team. It gives you more information, and it's that age-old adage of knowledge is power. The more information you've got, not that we want to, wave power over somebody, but the more information you've got, the more you understand, the more you can help. And so you mine that seam, similar to mining oil. You go down that route. Let's find out everything about that team, and write down those answers. And please, for goodness sake, have a pad and a pen. Write down the answers because. My memory is shot anyway, but you want to be making notes and making sure you're capturing everything because you want to make sure that you are confirming you've heard what they've said. Okay, and we're really narrowing down. So then you can just move on to that next line of questioning. So it seems fairly straightforward so far. So for those of you that have got your cameras on, can you nod or give me a thumbs up if you agree with that? Nicely done. Thank you. So where do we go? Where do we go from here? So as I said, we want to make sure that it's conversational rather than market research. We want to be keeping control of that conversation, and you're really going to want to ensure that you're not jumping ahead and trying to answer the problem that you've just heard. All right. So you love your business. You love what you do. I'm hoping you love what you're doing. You're a salesperson, you're a business owner. I'm itching to tell you about me and my business and how we can help. Do not do that, all right? Resist the urge to do that. This is not about you, this is about them. So what we want to do is we've gone through a line of questioning. We've understood their situation. Okay, so we know about the company, we know about the industry, we know about the department, we know about their role, we know about their own aspirations, their hopes and their fears, because we've used lovely open questions. When you've got that information, what I'd like you to start practicing when you're in these conversations is summarizing. Summarizing does a few things. It confirms that you were listening, so immediately gives you a good tick. This person has listened to what I was saying. That's marvelous, because a lot don't. A lot just sell to me, ask me questions. They don't give a hoot, and then they push their own product or service. When you summarize back, you've demonstrated that you've heard. Equally, what we want to do is make sure that the information we've captured is correct. And so you mentioned you've got 10 people in your team, 2 have recently left, and this is the current situation. Have I heard that correctly? And when they say actually no, it gives them a chance to correct the information that they may have told you or that you've taken down. It also reaffirms that information back to them. Now, sometimes you might say, yeah, I don't know, yeah, I pay £400 a month for my gas bill. Yeah, and you're saying that because it's a matter of fact. Somebody on the other end of that conversation might be, you're paying £400 a month for your gas bill? That's not right. That's not okay. And you're challenging the status quo. And actually, someone might hear that information back and think, that is ridiculous. Why have I allowed myself to be in that situation for so long? So summarizing is really important. But it then allows you to move into a position of challenging the status quo. So when I say challenging the status quo, some people might wonder what the hell I'm talking about. The idea is here is to use questions is to get them out of what they consider normal or comfortable, or what is a learned biased behavior in a situation, right? What we want to do is ask really good questions that challenge their thinking. So these questions might be set up like this. You mentioned that you've got a higher turnover of staff. What happens to your customer delivery, your project delivery, or your department if you don't solve that problem? Okay, so let's break that down. I've heard what they've said. I've reaffirmed it back to them. I've then asked them a question that considers an outcome in the future. If you don't fix it, what does that mean for you and your customers? If you do fix it, what does that mean for you and your customers? So immediately we're enabling the person on the other side of this conversation to suddenly remove themselves from the here and the now, the known, the bias, the comfortable, the status quo. They're removing themselves from that and they're thinking into the future about what might be. And that takes consideration. Now, for the bookworms among you, there is a great book out there written by a guy called Daniel Kahneman called Thinking, Fast and Slow. And he talks about 2 types of thought process. System 1, bias, fast, it's quick, 2 + 2. If there's a car coming, don't cross the road. But a challenging question will move someone into system 2 thinking, which is far more slow and considered. And that's where we need to get our prospects.
There we go.
Look at that.
I was like, I'm pretty sure it's on my bookcase.
On my life, that was not a plant. That was not a plant.
I'm right.
I'm really impressed. I love the fact you've got notes in there as well. So have a look at that. Other books are available. So it basically just gives a bit of insight into the way our brains think. So if you're going to buy a chocolate bar in a shop, no brainer, you go and pick up the one you want, you don't think about money, it's cheap enough and you always buy it. If you're buying a house or a car or a holiday, something more significant, it's a lot slower. The risk is greater. There are far more considerations, and you've got to think a lot more about it. If you're only asking superficial questions about a current situation, you will get superficial status quo answers. Unless you ask questions that challenge their thinking about the future, about not changing, you're going to struggle to get anything of value that you can help resolve. So, sorry, go on, Charlotte.
Just add to that, Ben. I think that also really helps them when there's buy-in on the other side, is that you put the person that you're speaking to is thinking in that future state. So they're starting to think as already of just, how this might work, how this might fit in. But it also just really helps them for if they then need to go and do some buy-in on their side as well. I think this tactic, again, if I put myself in the right as someone who's bought services before, like that's a really powerful tactic and mind state to get the buyer into. It just starts to tell a story rather than something that's transactional. It might be personally of just like, great, I bring in this vendor, I bring in this service, I bring in this consultant, whatever it might be, and that's the future. That is how we've solved it. And then what does that mean for me? What does it mean for my team? What does it mean for business? And it's just a completely different, it's storytelling essentially. And so just think about that knock-on effect, I suppose. Everyone in the audience is just like one conversation. Actually, it does spread out beyond that. So lots to think about, I know. But positively, it's great to make the person that you're speaking to feel empowered when they are then having those in conversations in terms of budget. If I need to go get that signed off, they're already thinking about it. So I love that.
Yeah, and so a simple structure that you can put that in is, earlier you said ... What does it mean if you do or do not change that? That's a really simple way of just asking a challenging question that's going to let people move into the future and challenge themselves. So when I said earlier about not jumping in with the answer or the solution or to pitch you, like really resist that. But what you can do is you say, I've got an idea for that, but we'll come on to that later, because you want to address all of the needs and the problems in one go rather than have a sporadic backwards and forwards, because if you do that, you're gonna miss information. So a lot of narrowing down these questions, you can see with any funnel, what you're doing is you're cutting away a lot at each stage. You're cutting away irrelevant information. You're cutting away stuff you don't need to know. Thank you all very much for your time, and we'll see you again on the 8th of June, if not before. But have a wonderful rest of your week.